A Trump supporter is a pedophile and still claims to be a Christian. Allow me to explain. Remember when Sarah Palin said this about Barack Obama?
Our opponent is someone who sees America as imperfect enough to pal around with terrorists.
The terrorist she is referring to is Bill Ayers. He was the leader of the Weather Underground, a 60s radical group that bombed public buildings during the 60s and 70s to protest the Vietnam War. Let's be clear about one thing first. In my opinion, Bill Ayers was a terrorist, a criminal, and a coward. At the time when Bill Ayers was bombing buildings, Barack Obama was only a child. Bill Ayers was 17 years old when Barack Obama was born. With such a massive age difference, it would have been very unlikely that they would have been palling around together while growing up. The New York Times and the Associated Press could not find any incidences where Barack Obama and Bill Ayers ever palled around together. Their only connection was they grew up in the same neighborhood in Chicago and served on the same charity board. So if the inference is that Obama is a terrorist because he grew up in the same neighborhood and was on a board with one, what about someone who literally pals around with pedophiles?
One of the first times you gave sex was with Ted Nugent. You went backstage, you claim.
And he hates me, and he can't remember it.
And you gave him oral sex.
Yeah, I was in my peer group, and they were groupies, and...
And you did it. You did that for Ted Nugent.
How old were you?
The
11?
one he said before. No, the one he said.
12
and a half.
Ted Nugent had oral sex with a 12-and-a-half-year-old girl. That's a pedophile. And who would be friends with this pedophile? But what if you actually endorse a pedophile?
Breaking news, stunning allegations tonight against Roy Moore, the controversial Republican Senate candidate from Alabama. He is in a must-win race for Republicans. According to the Washington Post, a woman says Moore initiated a sexual encounter years ago when she was 14 and he was 32. That woman, Lee Korfman, claims Moore babysat her outside of a courtroom so her mother could attend a child custody hearing. Korfman says Moore asked her for her phone number and days later picked her up, took her to his home and kissed her. During a second visit, she says he took off her shirt and pants, removed his clothes, touching her and guiding her to touch him. And there are many very graphic and explicit details on this. Let's just say this again. She was 14 years old.
So, who would endorse him?
So get out and vote for Roy Moore.
But it was not just Trump who supported Roy Moore. It was Trump supporters as well.
Even if it's true, I don't want to give up a Senate seat. If I had been a victim, I certainly wouldn't vote for him.
Are you more excited to vote for Roy Moore after these allegations came out?
Yes.
We're not going by what the liberal news says. I could give a damn less about what they say.
The allegations are kind of ridiculous. It was 40 years ago. So what if he dated teenagers?
Yep.
I dated teenagers when I was 30.
Exactly.
I was 20. Roy was 30.
He was 30, but they were 14.
Well, I think common sense tells you there's nothing to this.
Exactly. Common sense tells you one man denied it, 9 women said it happened, but he denied it. So
yeah.
Judge Roy Moore has more honor and integrity in that pinky finger than your entire family has in its whole DNA.
Jeffrey Epstein has been charged with sex trafficking girls as young as 14. According to the indictment, the hedge fund manager intentionally sought out minors for sexual exploitation and knew that many of his victims were under the age of 18. Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein have a history together as well, having known each other since the early 1990s. The New York Times reports that Trump hosted Epstein for a private party in 1992 that included dozens of women brought into Mar-a-Lago to entertain just Trump and Epstein.
So Trump supporters will support Trump, who literally embraces and supports known pedophiles. And Trump supporters will embrace them also. What does that say about them? Especially when they make excuses for the pedophile Roy Moore.
Are you all Christians here?
Yes.
Is Roy Moore a good Christian?
Yes. Absolutely.
Absolutely?
Yes.
All you have is a group of women that have come forward
How
and
many?
said,
How many?
7.
More.
There's really 3.
Higher. How many women have to come forward before you say, wait a minute, where there's smoke, there's fire?
Doesn't matter, Bob.
To me, there are only 2 women that maybe have a smoking gun, but, you know, the women's, their reputations were questionable at the time.
Is this how you want to be treated as a woman if something were to happen to you? Do you want to be dismissed that way?
Better have proof.
You know, it doesn't sound like it went beyond, there were still clothes on. It doesn't sound like it went beyond anything, and that as soon as the girl said she wasn't comfortable, he took her home.
I guess my question is, you blame her. She's 14.
I'm not blaming her. I'm blaming both of them.
This man has more integrity than you can find in the entire Congress right now. Don't fall for the George Soros assassination plan. The truth will come out. These women are all going to be proven, just like the 16 that went against President Trump, just right before the election.
What about the women who went against Bill Clinton?
The accusers of Clinton, everybody knows he's a womanizer.
"40 years ago in Alabama, people could get married at 13 and 14 years old. My grandmother at 13 was married. At 15, had 2 children and a husband and a job. If Roy Moore was guilty, if he was at the mall hitting on this 14-year-old, 40 years ago in Alabama, there's a lot of mamas and daddies that'd be thrilled that their 14-year-old was getting hit on by a district attorney. There's a lot of mamas and daddies that'd be thrilled that their 14-year-old was getting hit on by a district attorney."
Seriously, what the fuck?
There is something seriously wrong with these people. Their God is not Jesus. Their God is Trump and the GOP. They do not follow the teachings of Christ. Jesus never preached about embracing a pedophile because of their political party. They are blind and they don't want to see. These people are going to have a lot of explaining to do when they stand before Jesus and he asks, "What made you think I was okay with pedophiles?" I also love how they talk about forgiving Roy Moore. They never forgave Bill Clinton. Also, Roy Moore never repented. If they truly had Jesus in their heart, they wouldn't be behaving like this. Jesus wasn't hateful or angry. He preached about love, caring for others, and living a righteous life. And I would also like to add, do not think this is what a Christian is. These people are not Christians, not even remotely close. They are self-righteous, ignorant, and prideful. 3 things Jesus told us not to be. So bear that in mind next time one of them invokes Jesus' name while embracing a pedophile or an adulterer. terrorist she is referring to is Bill Ayers. He was a leader of the Underground Weather. He was the leader of the Weather Underground, a 60s radical group that bombed public buildings during the 60s and 70s to protest the Vietnam War.